Today on the Garage Gym Experiment podcast, I have Blake Kassel. He is the founder of Bodylastics, which that came back way back in 1996, 1998. I've got a ton of questions for him. Did some research. Very interesting guy. Sounds like we have some good stories to hear. Blake, based on that research, I saw that you did some work on Wall Street. Can you talk to us about your work in Wall Street and the evolution of where you got to today?
Sure. Wall Street was not something I wanted to do. I was floundering at about 24 years old, and my father said, "Hey, these guys are making a ton of money on Wall Street." And so a buddy of mine, his father owned a big firm called Cowan and Company. So I went there. I started as a sales trader. So sales trader, instead of being like a stockbroker dealing with individuals, you only deal with institutions. So, you're picking up the phone, you're going, "Hey, we have 300,000 Motorola to sell," and hang up, and then yes or no. And I was the worst sales trader, I think, on Wall Street. I didn't have a feeling for it at all. There were guys that were a lot. I had gone to graduate school. It didn't matter. Guys that were a lot less educated than I were from the streets that were unbelievable. Just wheeling and dealing at the same time with our firm and with, the bigger firms. It wasn't really for me. And at the same time that I started doing that, I started working on Bodylastics. I'd received a prototype. A buddy of mine and I had started to do a video program for people back then that didn't know how to use the gym and how to, for nutrition. And we got certified by NASM. NASM back then, incredible instructors talked about a great tool to use if your clients didn't have equipment and they pulled out a surgical tube. And so I said that to him and I go, "Hey, but one surgical tube, what's that going to do for a guy like me or you?" So I came up with the idea to put the clips on the ends of the bands. And so I'm coming home from Wall Street. We had found spry products in Mexico to make them for us, and I've got my suit on and my suspenders, and I have the box, and I get to the door of my apartment, and I'm so excited to see if it really works that I rip open the box. I clip on, at that time, it was just 4 bands, all 4 bands onto the handles, stood on the bands, did a curl, and I think the words, "I knew it," or like "Eureka," came out of my mouth because it created so much tension. It felt awesome. So I started to work on that. So my mother had me go to a psychic back in the day to see what I'd be doing for career. And she said, "You're going to have 2 careers." And so for about 4 years, I did Wall Street, but I also did Body Elastics in my free time.
Okay, so you're like 24, working on Wall Street. And you were, it sounds like you knew it wasn't right for you. And you started doing live videos. Take me back to that. Like, first of all, when I think of like late 90s workouts at home, it was like VHS. So tell me
Right.
about going live workouts and maybe just like what the scene for home gyms at the time was like during.
Sure. Well, I didn't actually go live until 2009. So earlier on, I did a really tongue in cheek video to go along with Body Elastics for instructional. And we were one of the first companies. I took video of all the different exercises and put it up on the web. And man, Jake, I got to tell you, back then, getting video on the web was near impossible. And somehow we were able to get these videos up for Strength Band University, which showed people how to do the exercises. And so I went from the firm that I was at originally to a second firm on Wall Street and then left that for another firm and then left for another firm. And the fourth firm that I went to, I got fired within the first month. And my ex-wife looked at me and I said, "Body Elastics has been calling my name for a long time." And she said, "Go for it." She was making a living. She said, "Do it." And so that really began. But I mean, the days on Wall Street when I worked at Joseph Owen Company, my phone number or my office number at the firm was a number that was given for Body Elastics. So someone would answer the phone, like one of the other traders on the desk, and very quietly they'd be like, "It's something for Body Elastics." And the boss found out and he was like, "Yeah, you
Mm.
can't be getting those calls here." I'm like, I don't know why they're coming in, but um, yeah, it was a crazy time.
Okay. Well, and then like so body elastics, what did you start selling? Were people selling resistance bands at the time? What was going on there?
So at that time, the only bands that you could find were like TheraBands, the flat ones, or it was a spry exercise tube with handles on the end. There was no way of stacking resistance on a band. So that's really what I created, I invented was putting the clips on the ends of the bands, which now you can see everywhere, so that you can create hundreds of pounds of tension. And really, also created their Spry had like this thing for the door that had just a little plastic piece that went on the side of the door with the hinge, and that made me nervous. So I came up with the fat door anchor that everyone uses now. And the first ones I got, I ordered water noodles and I chopped them up. And that's how I created the first door anchor. The term door anchor I came up with. They had it as door stop. And I'm like, that makes no sense. It's a door anchor. So did that. I had nylon in my house and sewed my own ankle straps and then brought them down to a seamstress, said, here's one, make 10. And that's really how all of that began. I had boxes piled up in my little apartment and I would get my orders online. So I didn't want to be really tied to a web designer. So back then, the first program you could use was, and the web was so new, was Front Page. And so I'd come home from Wall Street every day and I'd work for 2 or 3 hours on Front Page to learn it. And so I put up my first website in 98 when we launched, and I submitted it to Yahoo, which was the big search engine at the time. And I woke up the next day and there were a couple things in my email and they were orders. And I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. And I started screaming. I'm like, I think I got a couple of orders. And that's how it began. And I hired a PR woman to help me out, and we went to the publications, and I got in a lot of the female, publications. So Glamour, New Woman, Women's World. And then the big one was, so we were getting orders, and the big one was Prevention. I had a booth at, one of the shows in Atlanta for fitness, maybe the Super Show, and I had an interview there with a woman from Prevention, and she loved the product, and she said, "Well, what can you do for us?" I said, "I'll give you 30% off." And man, I sold 100 a day for 90 days, and then the last 2 days I did like 250 and 350. It was unreal, and I paid back all my debt that I'd taken out for Bodylastics.
Wow. So it sounds like it's interesting to hear you say that because it's like today it would be like through social media. That would be the best way to get the word out. But you were able to get magazines to help spread the word.
Yeah.
What else helped you get some traction? And then also, was it like, you mentioned 3 straight months of sales. Had you made it yet, or was there still quite a ways to go?
So at that point, I was still working on Wall Street. The way I got some traction, and I know it pissed them off. Way back in the day on Google, it was really easy to manipulate the search engines. And so when you typed in Bowflex, I was number 5 under Bowflex as the $50 alternative to Bowflex. And so I got a lot of sales through that. I mean, every day, because Bowflex was all over the television and getting tons of exposure. People were coming on the
Interesting.
web and then finding me. So that was, and then, from there, Amazon started to come into play, and someone suggested, why don't you, put the bands on there? And I did. And that helped out a ton. And that was really the beginning of, you know, going upwards.
Else was your early customers? Was it just women? Or I'd be curious to hear who was buying it at first and how did it slowly evolve?
Yeah, I think, from originally, so if we're talking about Glamour magazine and New Woman, it was women that were buying off of that initial push. And then after that, it was guys looking for an affordable solution that they could use at home. And I gave a lot of documentation. So it really flipped over. It became, at the beginning, it was mostly women when we first started. And then it kind of shifted where it was probably 65% men, 35% women. And then guys kept asking for more resistance. They go, well, do you have a fifth band? And so we used to send another blue. And then I was like, well, let's make a black band. And so we did that. And then people wanted more. And we did the purple and then the orange and then the gray. So that now we have the whole gamut running up to the gray is rated as 40, but if you double it over, you thread it through an anchor and attach it onto one handle and walk away till you hit the inner cord, you're looking like 120 pounds. It's a lot just for that one band. It's like an anaconda. It's huge.
And you mentioned Bowflex. What type of stuff was Bowflex selling back in like the late 90s, early 2000s? And just in general, I kind of touched upon it at the beginning. What did the home gym scene look like back then, but 20 years ago or so, 20, 30 years ago.
So back then you had, your Weider weight sets. You had Soloflex. Soloflex was the first one out. I had a Soloflex.
What's a solo
Soloflex
flex?
uses
Yeah.
belts. So Soloflex, it's this really simplistic looking design. It has a big post that comes up, a center post, and then it comes down to a couple of feet on the bottom, and you hook up the bar to different numbers on that post that's in the center to create your exercises. And there's a bench that goes on it as well. So it was like a work of art. It was a beautiful piece of equipment, but there was a lot to be desired. So I had one and it used elastic belts, but the elastic belts there, they weren't truly linear. They weren't great, even though they were made out of rubber. They weren't great. But even like when you set up for a bench press on a solo flex, once you got into position, the bar was right here, like against your nose, and you had to kind of maneuver your way into it. So they were the first ones. One of the guys, the model for SoloFlex, and they sold a ton of SoloFlex machines. I mean, I think 1,000,000 they sold. The guy who was the model on the SoloFlex ad, Randy, I forget his last name, he went and joined Bowflex, and he was a marketing powerhouse. And they started to market. Bowflex is the machine. It's a all-in-one trainer that has the power rods, that the cable and it stretches. So that was there. They were selling that for about $2,500. They were doing it with payments of $50 a month for 8 gazillion years, and the marketing was incredible. They did it really well, and they had testimonials on there, and so that was really the landscape. It went from Soloflex, and of course, like I said, free weight options. You have your Weider bench and dumbbells, Soloflex, and then Bowflex, and Bowflex was on every other channel because they had totally mastered the direct to consumer, infomercial platform.
Interesting. I do remember that Bowflex thing that you had with all of the different adjustments you could make. What about, this might be kind of random, but I'd be curious to hear, since you were so early to sell on Amazon, how did selling on Amazon first look? And then like how has it evolved over the years?
I was the only game in town at the beginning for that type of a product. So it was great. I ended up having two different sets. One had four bands, one had five. And then we went to 5 and 6, and I was number 1 and 2 under exercise bands for years. At the beginning, so when I first started with the internet stuff, the way that we manipulated Google is we would buy up all the domains. So I own domains like exercisebands.com, resistancebands.com, fitnessbands.com, you name it. And I had a site for each of those different domains with the keywords targeted for that. And if you search Google for all of those things, cheap exercise equipment, travel gym, portable gym, I was number 1 or number 2 because we manipulated. So when I went to Amazon at the beginning, I go, well, let me do the same thing. So I created multiple versions of my product. So this was the fitness band set by Bodylastics, the resistance band set, and I was cleaning up. And then Amazon came back and they were like, yeah, you can't do that. You're confusing customers. I was like, oh, that sucks. Okay. So we just went to one. The landscape now, people who have created band sets without and I have patents on my band set, but people who wanted to get around the patent or just had a lesser quality set, they started popping up, all over the place.
Like when?
I would say 2006, 2007, I started to see a lot of copycats coming in. Um, I continued during that time to increase the quality of what we had. I was actually using the product. Like I said, I started to do live workouts in 2009, which we can talk about. And something would bother me, and I go, "We got to fix that. I don't like that." And then I would go back to the factory and say, "Can we do this instead? And please do this." And I kept evolving the product. And even now, most of the resistance band sets that you see on Amazon were quality wise, we have the reputation we do because it costs us more to make them, whether that's the handles or the ankle straps or the bands themselves. And that's really how we separate ourselves from the competition.
Gotcha. That is one huge complaint of like interviews I do, where you have a patent, you have a unique product, and then like soon after you get some traction, you get flooded with cheap knockoffs, and a lot of the consumers just don't know the difference, especially if they have just a little bit of information on the product. So I'd be curious to take your overall. I'd be curious to hear your just like general take on selling on Amazon today with like a product like yours.
I think to break in, very difficult unless you're factory direct. And most of my competitors now, it's the actual factory in China that's selling direct and maybe under 2 or 3 different names.
Yeah.
Since I've been doing this for more than half my life or pretty close to it, I have a reputation. So people are looking for me anyway. Trainers are recommending it. Doctors are recommending it. People who had them years ago want a new set and they're telling their friends. So I'm lucky in that respect. But just starting out, a weekend warrior who goes, I'm going to order some bands from China and sell them on Amazon. And if you don't have a team running your Amazon promotions and advertising, it would be really, really difficult to break in.
Gotcha. Do you have any advice for anybody just dealing with it or they're dealing with a ton of knockoffs on Amazon?
You know, if you can separate yourself out, I mean, I have an inner cord inside of every band, which acts like a governor, prevents you from overstretching the band, which is the number one cause of snaps. It also, if the band does snap, the band's not flying at you, it just shortens on the inner cord. We haven't really done, I'll be, transparent. We haven't done a great job of really separating ourselves out from that little um, which we're about to do. I mean, the company is really about to be reborn in the next few months. Really exciting. And so on Amazon, you'll see a bigger push to basically the anti-snap or snap-resistant technology that we have. So you need
Gotcha.
something to really stand out. Social media, get influencers if you can to start using your product and talking about your product. If you look at someone like Freak Athlete, what an amazing job they did. And I know Yogi, he's an incredibly nice guy, and these guys, got their product in. They got it in the hands of a bunch of influencers. They said, "Here's the product. Be an affiliate." The influencers loved the product, started to talk about it like crazy, became affiliates, and then they supported that with ads on Instagram and Facebook. It's not rocket science. That's how you're going to get there. And then if you're driving people to Amazon as well, then the more you sell, the higher you go up in the ranks, the more you're shown on Amazon.
Cool. All right. Well, how about those live workouts? Tell me about going live way back in like 2009. And also just if you could, before you talk about going live, can you touch on like how many videos and what those looked like that you published beforehand before you started doing the live workouts?
Yeah, we didn't publish a lot. Like I said, we had those initial workouts, the instructional videos we put on Strength Band University. Beyond that, there wasn't much. I mean, it was just we're talking about 2007, 2008, 2009 to get something live or to film something and get it edited. It was a ridiculous amount of work. So we we had an office, a small office. Side the guy that was worked right next to me, my right-hand man, Ashanti, McKissick, and we said, "Well, let's see what the P90X hype's all about." It was on every channel, like, all day
Hmm.
because the profit margins were so high. And we got the workouts and we tried them and we loved them, and we said, "Wow, you know what? These guys really Tony Horton set the bar." Because guys typically watching, you had Jane Fonda videos, those were the group workout videos. Guys weren't doing those, but here comes Tony Horton, kinda makes it like a gym atmosphere and workout partner atmosphere, and that's why it exploded. And their marketing was amazing. But they was mainly dumbbells and free weights, and they kind of threw resistance bands in there as an add-on. And so I turned to Ashanti and I go, I think if we do this better on our own, I know that we could do it better. And what if we, started to stream live workouts for our customers? And so he said, yeah, let's do it. So I rented a space and I found a guy to do sets who was awesome. And we built this set that was somewhat similar to P90X-ish, and, I had never gone full bands in my workouts. I was always
Mm.
a power bodybuilder. I was still doing free weights, and so I knew the science, I knew the input that we got from our customers, seeing incredible results, but here I was, it was my company, and I turned to Ashanti and I go, "Bro, what happens if we start doing these workouts and we don't get any bigger or we don't make progress? Like, that'll be it. I have no plan B. This is it." And, we didn't know who was going to do the instructing. And we didn't want to hire an instructor because, in that case, if they created a following and they left, then we would lose the whole following. So I was like, oh, I have to do it. And since I was certified by NASM, I knew, a good amount about kinesiology and biomechanics. And so we started November 29th, 2009 was our first show. And like I said, trying to get it to go live, I had to buy these $6,000 Sony cameras and have a
Mhm.
camera guy, and they were heavy. And just to get it, you had like Ustream, and there were a couple of services that did live. That was it. So we started doing live, and then we put it for on-demand replay, and then we put it up to the web to a site called Live Exercise. And very quickly, I found out that the bands were just, I'd never taken the leap with my own product, and I finally did, and I was shocked, shocked. And so at that time, I had contact with Jim Stepani, who was working at Muscle and Fitness, and my buddy had introduced me to him. And I did like the first 3 programs, which were based on my bodybuilding days, and then I was out of ideas. And so I contacted Jim, and I'm like, "Hey, man, would you help me?" And Jim said, "Yeah, let me give you some ideas of the science that I'm seeing." So then we started to do stuff like, Tabatas for band training, and we talked about positive and negatives, static holds, doing something crazy like doing chest on a Monday and then following up on a Tuesday. I go, "Can you do that?" And he goes, "Yeah, because after the first day, your cortisol levels will drop, but you shouldn't do the same type of reps. So if you're doing heavy on Monday, Tuesday, do higher reps, less resistance." And then I just, I put on my mad science hat and just started creating all these incredible workouts, really just mixing it up with fast reps, slow reps, negatives, positives, static holds. And we changed it up every month. And so we had thousands of people working out with us every month because they saw great results and they never got bored.
How many years did you do that? 13.
And I wasn't I'm the great inventor guy. I'm not I'm okay marketing to a degree, but that's really not my wheelhouse. So that site should have been huge. And when it was free, we had 50,000 members. And I think I was paying to actually be on my own show for a good number of the 13 years because it just wasn't bringing in that much. We didn't have enough subscribers at that time. But the bottom line is it kept me in shape because I had to come in. People were expecting me. They were relying on me to come in and do the workouts. And I did. And I just fired it up again, but on Flexicon. I'm doing a
Okay.
hybrid of Bodylastics and Flexicon.
Okay. All right. Well, how about a follow up to you mentioning how you finally went full bands and you either stayed in the same shape or you got in better shape. Can you, and then, just thinking about, your average person getting into fitness, they may not realize all of the benefits of resistance bands. So I'd love for you to just kind of go resistance bands 101 for us and just give us some reasons like why resistance bands.
So resistance bands it's a linear type of resistance. So if we look at free weights and we look at a barbell bench press, a lot of guys are really strong out of the gate and they push really hard, and momentum from pushing really hard carries the bar a little bit, and they're not getting full tension the entire way. But here, you've got 150 pounds at the start, and I've got 150 pounds at the end. When you're using bands get more difficult as you stretch them, and it's this beautiful linear line. So I may only be at 100 at the start, but I'm at 160 at the end. So where as your muscles contracting and you're at the end of your contraction, you're getting the most amount of resistance. You can train on bands the way that you cannot train with free weights because there's no momentum. So if you were to take a dumbbell in your hand like this and throw it that way, probably the weight's going to keep going and it's going to tear something in your arm. A band, you can train for speed because it's always pulling you back to the origin point. And so if I took a band and it went like that, it would pull me right back. So I can train for speed with that, which is amazing for athletes. Because you are getting less resistance at the start of an exercise, like, for example, a bench press, where is the joint most vulnerable? Well, it's right there where you start because there's not a good amount of leverage at that point. So guys who have joint pain, using bands is unbelievable because at their most vulnerable and weakest point in the joint, they're getting the least amount of tension. So incredible pumps with bands. Like I said, if you were to take a band set and you were to do 3 sets of 12 reps every week, it's just not going to happen. There are ways of training with it. Right now, the program that I'm doing is intervals. So let's say that I'm doing bench press on Flexicon. I do 20 seconds of reps, followed by 10 seconds of rest. And you repeat that 5 more times after the first set. And it is nasty, nasty. The whole workout takes me, for 2 muscle groups, takes me 28 minutes. And I'm sore after every single workout. Plus, really the reduction in injuries from bands. I call it the free weight paradox. And I know this because I was a power bodybuilder and I lifted big weights and I was a big guy. And so you start at the beginning, you start training, right? You get stronger, 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 stronger on the circle. And then you get injured. And then you have to rest, 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 rest. And then you come back to your starting position again. You always end up back there. So to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger without injury, bands do that because you're easy on the joints and you're tough on the muscle. I just got back into training on a regular basis. And every time after the workout, the first thing I do is I run into the bathroom, take off my shirt and see, like, any progress? And I'm shocked at the amount of size that I'm putting on at 56 years old.
Cool. Good info. What about like, how about somebody who maybe they have like they're living in an apartment or they have a space in their home. They're not ready to like go all out on like a home gym. And I personally think like resistance bands are a great way to start a home gym. And it's also something that you could use like by itself for a while to get things rolling. What would you recommend, maybe just like your average guy just trying to get back into shape, like what should they get first and what kind of like add-ons should they get so that they can use bands for like a full workout and maybe do it like what you're mentioning, like full band workouts consistently for like
Yeah.
months. What would you want to get for
So, I would start with like a 6 band kit. If we're talking about Bodylastics, I would start with a 6 band kit. A Bodylastics, which comes with 2 handles, 2 ankle straps, and a door anchor. And the Ultra Anchor, which we're bringing back, is about to ship from the factory. The Ultra Anchor looks like a big spider for your door. I created that because when we started first filming the workouts, I had to keep opening the door to move the door anchor, and it was annoying. So I created this octopus to go over your door so you never have to open the door and you can quickly change between exercises. So a band kit, the Ultra Anchor, and then we have the curl bars about to ship as well, and those are awesome. But that's pretty much all you need on a mat. That's it,
and
and you're
what
good
can
to
you do
go.
with that? What can you do with all that?
So if you take that, I have an app called Body Last. That's where all of those workouts lived from 13 years of filming. It's 7,000 workouts, about 4,000 are just bands, and you'll be doing workouts that you never thought possible. Buddy of mine, Steve Feaster from up in Vero Beach. Steve is an amazing instructor, and he led the chiseled cardio workout and did things that people just didn't do, plyometric stuff, and the most incredible routines. And so you go onto that app and you say what kind of workout you want. There are like 50 different to choose from, and you press play and you follow along. That's it. There's no guesswork. You just follow along. The instructor's suffering, you're suffering, and you're, making progress.
Cool. And then what about for like somebody who they already have a full gym? Like they love using barbells, they love using dumbbells, they like the pulling machines. How would you suggest somebody who maybe doesn't have any bands or they don't use bands at all? How would you suggest they slowly start implementing them? Because it sounds like they're super beneficial as you start to get older and your joints may not be. They may be a little bit easier to get hurt. Just would love your perspective on
Yeah.
that. How do you slowly add them into your home gym?
I would say for someone that's, we always say, my customer, if you love free weights and you love lifting free weights, God bless you, keep going. You're not my customer. But
Okay.
for someone that does have free weights, even starting out first, because I started to have some shoulder pain recently, and just from doing this for so long, I'm like, you know what? I haven't done external rotation in the up position for a long time, and I kind of feel like I need to do that. And as soon as I started doing that, I felt better. So for someone that has a weight set up in their home, getting bands to start working initially, maybe on something like rotator cuff. For doing lateral raises is great. If you're getting pinching doing your lateral raises, they're awesome for that. And then to start to gradually make your way towards that. But listen, there are certainly guys in their 80s that are still using free weights. Like I said, if that's what you like, then stick with it. I would never tell anyone to switch. But if you're having pain, and you talked about injuries, I've had open heart surgery in 2016. I've had 2 neck surgeries, shoulder, knee, 3 hernia. Like, I shouldn't be in the kind of shape that I'm in, but whatever surgery I have to keep training, I do.
Cool. Thank you. What about the Flexicon? Tell me about that machine. When did you originally think of something like that? And, maybe just the origin story and how it has evolved to where it's at today.
Sure. In about 2006, Shanti and I were in an even smaller office, and I wanted to start to play around with the design for a machine. So we bought a used SoloFlex, and I wanted them to do something to the bar where you could hook the bands. And I brought it to a guy that knew how to do, metal work, and they made some adjustments, and it was pretty awful. And I got busy with those stuff, and we didn't continue on. But I always wanted to get back to it. And during COVID, after I had had my neck surgery, the first one, I bought a Power Tech machine. It was just for bench, and you could kind of do shoulder press. But I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to have something as a starting point. And so after I was good to go with lifting again, for my comeback, I jerry-rigged bands everywhere all over this Power Tech machine. And I took a video of my comeback, and I was doing a bench press, and you could see all the bands around me, and you couldn't really see the machine. And we got flooded with emails. What is that machine? How much is it? How do I get it? I was like, oh man. So I pulled the video, and I said, I
Mm,
better get working on this.
mm.
So I knew an industrial designer. He had helped me with my curl bar. And we started the process of, well, this would work this way and this would work this way. And I was also talking with Mike McErlane from Gym Supplement Sciences, an old buddy of mine from Weider. I came up with a design, at least for the prototype. And I had the prototype made in California. They were the only ones. I tried to find metal fabrication. I couldn't find anyone. Found this guy's in California. Had the design done. It was an A-frame because I wanted it to be kind of like a hammer strength. So as you did like
Yeah.
a bench press, you were coming up and together. And it was a great theory. But if you were doing a bench press, that's great. If I was doing a squat, as I stood up, the handles came in like this, and it was like, "Bleh." So we had to try to modify that, and we did. We made the arms move, but the proof of concept was there. The machine worked. I knew that it would be incredible, and it was. Mike put that machine at Gym Supplement Sciences gym. They have one at the main headquarters, and guys loved the machine. Trainers with professional baseball players loved the machine. So I went out to China trying to find a factory. I found a factory. And last year, not this year, but last year in 2024, I was in China 9 times for weeks at a time. And first got there, we did the A-frame with the moving arms. And I'd already spent about $80,000 on IP for, applying for trademarks, patents, and it sucked. It was awful. And we're like 4 days in on the factory, and I'm using this thing. And we go to lunch, and I'm in total depression. I'm like, this is awful. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with it? And, what's the difference? If someone's doing a bench press in the gym, they're here. Lat pull, they're here. And so I got rid of the A-frame. And once we got rid of the A-frame, it really started to take shape. And I was in China for weeks at a time. They would pick me up at 7 in the morning. The designer would pick me up. We'd go to the factory, and then they'd say, okay, the next prototype will be ready at 11 o'clock. Okay. And I'd do my work, and then 11 o'clock would check it and say, no, put this here. This isn't right. Get it to a certain point, and then I would have it airshipped. Whichever one we just worked on, I would have airshipped back to the US, and a buddy of mine would use it for a month. And I would take notes. This doesn't
Mhm.
work right. I don't like this. Let's change this. I did that like 6 times. So I would make the notes, go back to China, see the changes, make some more changes, ship another one. I did that over and over and over again. And then I was pretty close to production, and I sent one to hybrid training.
Yeah.
Michael, I forget his last name. And he said, do you have anything that I could try? I've heard about this. And I'm like, I have a prototype in the garage, but it's just a prototype. He goes, come on, send it. And I said, okay. So I sent it, and all the hardware was in a bag, just one bag. And it took us 2 hours on FaceTime to assemble it. It couldn't be assembled the whole way. And he said, This was the most difficult piece of equipment I've ever assembled.
Mm,
So I had to go back to the factory, and they usually had 4 guys put it together. I said, "Go grab 2 guys from accounting, and let's see how long it takes them." It took them 4 hours.
mm,
So we had to go back and fix everything so it was easy to assemble. But I was in the process of making the machine. Initially, I wanted squats and bench press, and it just evolved. I always say that all glory goes to God. I didn't create that machine. It was through him that I did that, because we'd start working on it and we'd make a change. And I go, wait, I think we could do deadlift. And then here you are doing exercise really close to deadlift. And hey, I think we could do this. And the machine now is just the one that we're selling is it's just unbelievable. It is, I've had machines, tons of them. It is the most incredible home gym to ever hit the market. The people that we've delivered to, we've delivered 225 machines to customers. A lot of these customers had bought everything and they list it in their testimonial that they post to the website. I've owned this, and this. Bodylastics, game changer, most incredible home gym to ever hit the market. And, of course, when I used to tell my father when I was in the middle of creating Flexicon, I'm like, Dad, this is the greatest home gym ever. He goes, you're just saying that because it's yours. But we've heard from enough customers and people that have used it. I have it at personal training gyms with top personal trainers who are using that with professional athletes who love it, who are using it with guys from the Panthers and baseball players and MMA guys who love working on the machine because of how it feels.
for anybody who's listening, maybe they've seen it, but they haven't maybe spent a ton of time researching it. Can you just explain what it is and all that it can do?
Sure. So I knew that the design when we were making it, if you didn't have a platform to stand on that was connected pretty much to the whole frame, that the machine would be pushed up as you were raising it. So Flexicon is an all-in-one trainer. It mainly works with 2 main arms that are in the front that you can set with stopper arms at different heights, and you're setting them at different heights to create different exercises. So if you're doing a deadlift, your main arms would come all the way down, and on the side of the arms, there are horns or pegs, and on the bottom of the machine, there are places, we call them C-rings, where you can attach a clip band or a loop band. And so what you do, if you did a deadlift, the arms would come all the way down. You would hook up the bands to the bottom of the machine and then around the pegs, and that'll create your resistance. And then if you want to do like a bench press, you would set your arms. There are different numbers for the stopper arms at number 5. Put in your bench, hook up your bands again, clip on the bottom, up and over the peg. And as you're pushing up, you're stretching the band. And then squats, same thing. Shoulder press, same thing. But we also have side arms. So the side arms that stay in that position can either be articulated out so that you can create something like a chest fly. And I hated chest fly with the bands from an anchor right behind you
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
not really where you're pulling from. You're supposed to be pulling from the sides. You can create that with Flexicon. It also enabled us to connect the bands from the top down. So now you can do lat pull because if I clip the bands and they also telescope. So if I have the side arms and they telescope up and I clip a band on there, it now creates a loop and I raise the main arm up, I can go around the pegs of that main arm. So now I'm pulling down against tension and stretching as I'm pulling down. Not to mention, any other plane that you want to do, you can hook up the bands anywhere to do anything. And you can come up with as many exercises as you want because there's so many places to clip the bands. So that's really how it works. Bottom up, you're stretching. Bottom down, top down, you're stretching for every exercise from the gym that you could want and imagine.
You mentioned a lot of athletes using a lot of personal trainers. Who have been the first people to really use it the most, and who are your first customers for something like this?
They were really, I did Kickstarter last year. I'd been promoting it for a while. People who were in my community had seen all the videos and what I was doing. So most of Bodylastics customers had bought. Then from there, word of mouth. We still really haven't gone full blown marketing. That's coming. So I launched in September of last year on Kickstarter, and then we wrapped it up, and then we had to wait for the product to be produced. And customers really started getting it around April. And like I said, I held my breath because I wanted to see what they were saying.
Hmm.
I had brought in all of my friends who were top personal trainers because they were instructors for me on live exercise and gym owners. and they were all blown away from the first prototypes. But that's great because they were blown away, but I wanted to see what customers thought. And everybody says, love the machine. It's 5 out of 5 stars across the board, and people love that machine because at 56 years old, you can train again like you're 19 because there's no pain and you feel safe. Big difference with Flexicon. If you're doing a barbell squat, and let's say that you have 3 more in the tank, but you're tired, and there's that point where you go, nah, I think I'm going to re-rack it because you don't want to blow out your knee or do something or get injured. With Flexicon, there's no risk of injury. So you're going to push through those last 3 reps. You work the muscles ridiculously hard. And like I said, I just started posting again not live workouts, but new workouts, and people are subscribing for that. And they take about 28 minutes, and I'm gassed. I can hardly make it through the 28 minutes because you work harder on this machine than you do with free weights.
Hmm. Interesting. Awesome. Very cool. What about going forward? What's your main focus going forward? I know you touched on, differentiating yourself through traditional resistance bands. Obviously, this is not your standard resistance band setup. So would just love to hear what's your focus going forward?
My vision for Flexicon is to be one of the top 3 equipment manufacturers. I go to the gym to do cardio only, and I see guys jerry-rigging techno gym machines all the time with bands.
Yes.
Guys want it. This is my wheelhouse. So I see us first starting with our first machine, which is the Flexicon that you see now. I would like to go to a smaller machine that folds, that can be wheeled out of the way along the lines of Expedience. It's already here,
Mm.
and I'll start working on it soon. Then maybe even a bigger commercial model, and then I want individual machines. So bench press, squat, shoulder press. I've had guys, so like I said, I see people using it in the gym. I've had guys on Flexicon that go, I can't do shoulder press because I've had 3 shoulder surgeries. And I go, wait. And I set up for shoulder press, and they're going like this. I can't believe I'm doing shoulder press. Like the smile on their face. We have Fit Shop is the largest distributor of home exercise equipment in Europe. We're doing a co-branding with them. Their brand is called Taurus. We're doing Taurus Flexicon. And they flew me out to Germany to train their salespeople because they have 70 showrooms across Europe. And in one of the groups, there was an older guy. He had to be in his 70s. And he goes, do you mind if I sit in? And I go, oh, that's fine. And he said, I have frozen shoulder. I said, okay. And we got to shoulder press. And this guy's face, you should have seen, like, he started to do shoulder press and he was like he couldn't believe that he was doing it. And we got to the end of the demonstration and he said, I just want you to let you know that I work here. I'm one of the guys in the warehouse. And he said, I put those 2 machines together and I hated them. He
Mm.
said, you sold me.
Hmm.
And he said, I'm going to get one. All someone has to do is try it. Like I said, if you're used to free weights and that's what you want. Now, when we were we went to FIBO, which is the largest fitness expo in the world, and our factory gave us a section for Flexicon. And it's amazing, when you see, because you have to get the negative with Flexicon bench press because the bands they'll just shoot you right back down. So you really have to control the negative. And
Mhm.
what we saw, which was incredible from free weights, the difference, there are a lot of guys that do bench press on free weights and here and drop it and here and drop it, and they're not getting the benefit of the negative. And I knew the guys that didn't do that because when they would use Flexicon, they would press up and they'd struggle. And on the way
Mm.
down, it was a lot of this because they didn't have the
Interesting.
strength for the negative. And you really develop that with Flexicon. And for athletes, now you can train, coaches can have them train as fast as they want to train without the risk of injury because there's no momentum and there's no inertia.
Very cool. Um, Anything else to add to the Flexicon stuff, or is that pretty much it?
Well, it depends on what else you're asking. I mean, my journey to here with Flexicon, once I started, I couldn't stop. Bodylastics had production problems and we were out of inventory for months and months, but bills keep coming in, trips to China. I'm paying for all that. Start to rack up a lot of debt. I saw what was coming with Bodylastics. So I would be in China, staying at the hotel, which was like an apartment building, and go to do cardio in the morning and literally tears rolling down my eyes as I'm doing cardio because I know it's coming. And what ended up coming was Here's a company, Bodylastics, that did $12 million over the past 6 years, to me going broke, homeless, and driving Uber. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that that would ever happen, and it did. If you've never been there, I hope you never go there. I've never been so scared in my entire life. I couldn't stay full time with my girlfriend because she would lose her alimony, so I had to drive all the way up to Vero Beach, an hour and a half north, to stay with Steve Feaster because he's like family and they had an extra room. Bodylastics was lucky enough that God thing that we partnered with the original factory, and they injected a ton of money into replacing all of the inventory, and Bodylastics will be better than ever. The first time restocked in 3 years is coming in the next number of weeks. And Flexicon, we have interest from investors, but even if we go the route of advertising along the lines of Freak Athlete and getting the product into the hands of influencers and then doing Instagram and Facebook ads, that's the direction we'll go. But I mean, the future's bright, but 2025 was by far the worst year of my entire life.
Wow. Uh, that seemed to come out of nowhere. How long were you in that phase?
Year and a half, things were really tough, and it took a toll on my fiance and I. So we were engaged, and the pressure financially for me, and she was having her own, it just killed us. And we're still in contact. We still work together on stuff. She's in nutrition, but it was a year and a half of just a steady, but like I said, I saw it coming. And I'd gone down the wrong path with a couple of investors for Flexicon, especially when you're starting out, you don't know how to deal with investors and they see the desperation, with my back against the wall, and I had to say, no, I'm not doing this. Forget it.
Can you elaborate on like what a bad deal with an investor looks like?
Yeah, I had brought on through a friend of a family member, an operating founder who was trying to carve out a very large percentage for himself. I started to reach out to other places to promote, and there was a group that has a TV show I went on, and the guy from there is a big motivational speaker, and he was going to get involved. It turns out, just by chance, that he was best friends in high school with the guy that I brought as an operating founder, and the deal for him to get involved to promote, which I thought would be great, they were taking the majority of my company, 65%. This guy had given himself 32.5%. The guy that I brought on as an operating founder, he hadn't done anything for the company yet. And he sent me the contract. And I have a buddy who invests all the time. He runs a family office. They have a ton of money. He's super smart. He kept saying to me, "It's not a good deal. It's not a good deal." And then we started to get towards the end. He goes, "Blake, you're not listening to me." And he had spoken to someone else that I know, and he said, as soon as he signs that, they're going to take his company away. So I said, "I'm out. No." And so it was the best move for me. I know where this company will go, but it was to have your back against the wall and to have maybe something that would work out for you and to say no it was a really tough decision, but I'm so glad that I made it.
Wow. That wild. So what's the current status of like if you order today? Can you order today? Is it a pre-order? What's going on there?
We'll start pre-orders again soon. Right now we just sold out, so pre-orders will begin soon. We always have the Chinese New Year to contend with, which the factories are closed for like 3 weeks. So after the start of the year, I'll start taking orders for, hopefully late March, April deliveries. And I'm excited that, we're using the original band factory. That was always my favorite factory. So, good stuff ahead. And we'll keep evolving the product and making changes to the Flexicon machine, things that still annoy me that I go, let's fix that. And we go and fix it. But yeah, that's really the plan. And then of course is marketing. And like I said, we do have investors that are interested. I do have friends that I didn't want to do that, friends that have offered me to loan me the money to get things rolling. So that'll come. I think my main focus was let's get Bodylastics, the moneymaker, up and running, the original moneymaker, back to health, and then really push Flexicon.
Got it. You're all in. It sounds like you're very passionate. Obviously, you got cool stuff to look forward to. We want to keep building off of it. All right. And we know when the orders will come back up. All right. Well, I think that's all. I have some other just like miscellaneous questions for you. You know,
Yeah, fire away.
we talked about home gyms like 20, 30 years ago. I'd be curious to hear how you've seen that space evolve over the last or since you started in the space.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being a lot of leverage machines, which are I have nothing against leverage machines. They're great. There are a lot of good ones. The Quantum Trainer looks super cool. PowerTech has great stuff, and then you see a lot of knockoffs on Amazon that are still highly rated. I'm not a big fan of the magnetic resistance.
Okay.
Again, before joint strain, the ones that I've used, I know that some are trying to mimic the feel of bands and can do that. Still, you're dealing with a flywheel and a pulley. And with Flexicon, there's no flywheel, no pulley. You're pulling directly. It's the smoothest resistance you can get. On top of the fact, when we look at some of the machines that are out there, let's take Oxfit, for example. To get into position for a squat, you know, it's okay. It's not great. Flexicon, you're getting under the bar like a traditional squat. Bench press, I'm not having to maneuver that bar into because it's all the way back here. You're setting up for bench press the way that you do bench press. So I think those machines, if they work for people, great. I haven't seen any monsters coming out of training with magnetic resistance. One of our guys, Ryan White, who's been a longtime customer and watched a lot of the videos, he was a live exercise customer for 13 years. He got the Flexicon in June and started really getting into it in June and just recently stepped on the scale and he was 10 pounds heavier. And he was like, what? What the? And then he went and looked at his metrics. He gained, he gained 9 pounds of muscle since June with Flexicon and said, this thing's unbelievable for building muscle. Now that I got to tell you, man, that stress, the stress that I had from basically going for broke and going broke, workouts were few and far between. I was losing a ton of muscle. And what's happening now is the muscle gain has been, like I said, shocking even for me. Now, if I could eat a little more, I would probably put on more muscle. But I think it's going, what you're going to see in the future is a lot of guys training with bands and getting massive
Hmm.
with machines like Flexicon.
What did you think about the Garage Gym Reviews review?
Love Coop. Um, Coop wasn't using the machine correctly. So
Hmm.
even for bench press, he had the main arm down like this. And so the band was lax at the start of the exercise. He didn't get the amount of tension. He would have gotten great tension even at the bottom of the exercise. He had threaded the band through one of the C rings on the side to do chest fly, which you never do. You have to use a loop, and we provide those. Stuff like the lat pull, he said, it's good, but every time that I bring it re-racks itself. And that was because he had them telescoped too high. If he had brought it down to number 4, he would have been done with the exercise and they would have sat ready to go. So I would love if Coop is brave enough to work out with a 56-year-old nut job. I would love to put Coop through a workout with Flexicon, using it the way that it should be used. And partially, Jake, that's my fault because Flexicon should come with better documentation. And that was just for me being so busy. And now I saw Total Gym had these like 8.5 by 11 cards with the exercises. And we just did that for Flexicon. So your favorite exercise is bench, shoulder press. It'll tell you what settings
Yeah.
for that exercise. But I think he said a lot of great stuff as well. I don't think,
Yeah.
like I said, he showcased it to the degree that he could have and had the experience that he could have had. So I'd love another bite at the apple.
I'm sure he'd be totally open to having you and going through a workout.
Yeah, I would
um,
love that, man.
let's see. Yeah, I think that's good. Wild story, a lot of great information. Anything else before we close it?
No, I'm sorry I dropped the bomb on you about, kind of what happened to me over the past year and a half, but I think it's important for the story because that's how committed I am to this. Back in 1998, I knew what I had with the first stackable band system, and you couldn't change my mind. Quick story as we end. My sister's in public relations, and when I first came to her with Bodylastics, I said, I want you to do PR for me. And she said, well, let me give it to my trainer, Chris Imbo, in the city. And he was like the top rated trainer in New York City. And she laughed at the product when I showed it to her in the video, and she came back the next day and said, he likes it. He wants it. He wants to put his name on it." And I said, "No, it's mine. No, he can't put his name on it." And she'll tell you a different story, but she said, "Okay, fine. Call me when you make $1 million," and hung up the phone on me. But I knew what I had. I I knew what I had back then, and I know what I have with Flexicon, and that's why I ended up where I was, because there was no way I was going to stop. And I have one last story if you want one last story.
Let's hear it.
With Bodylastics, we went to one of the early Arnold classics, and I got a booth, and I had this, crappy little booth. It was right next to Next Nutrition, which was the biggest name at that point with Designer Whey. They were the biggest name in protein, and they had four booths next to each other with this incredible one. And here I had this little crappy one with a graphic that I put on, and I went with my sister-in-law. She was going to help me, and she said, "Well, how do we bring people in? Should we get water or candy?" And I'm like, "Candy? This is a bodybuilding, every the biggest guy from every small town around the country is here to see the show." And so I came up with a gimmick at the last minute. I had a banner printed. It said, "If you can curl all four bands 30 times, I'll give it to you." So as these guys walked by and they're holding their bags of protein and everything and their samples, I'd say, "Hey, big guy, if you can do 30 reps with all four bands, I'll give it to you." And his girlfriend would go, "Go on, honey." And she'd like, poke him. And he's like, "Okay." And so he goes, "No problem." And they would stand on the bands and he'd start doing reps, right? And he'd get to he'd be like, "This is nothing." And then he'd get to 11, 12. And then you could see he starts to slow down. And then, he starts to get 17, 18, and they start breathing and their form goes to crap and they start screaming. I brought 200 sets of Bodylastics with me. They would start screaming and huge crowds were forming around my crappy little booth to see what the commotion was. And in the crowd, people would go, "I'll buy one. I'll buy one." And we would just hand it. I was selling them for $20 as a promotion. And we just went back and forth. But like I said, I knew what I had. And Flexicon, for anyone that's on the fence, don't be, because if you have joint pain, I made it for me and guys that are physically broken. That was my why, but it applies to so many other avatars. But if you have pain doing bench press and shoulder press and lateral raise and squats in your knees and your back, and you want to train like you did when you were 19 again, Flexicon is the machine for you until you croak, because you could use that machine in your 80s and 90s because it's so gentle on the body, but so tough on the muscles.
Yeah, cool. And I do like the idea too of, you have the Flexicon, and then if you are able to get it up and running and start getting some individual machines, you can have a really nice gym with no weights, or like you could be able to take
Oh
the
yeah.
bands from here to here and just do a lot of different things without loading your gym in with hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Or if like you're like you have a two-story house or something like that, you have a gym at the top, you wouldn't necessarily have to. Or like an apartment, like you're living in somewhere and you have a room for that. So yeah,
Hmm.
I see a lot of potential for that. Cool.
So it's whisper quiet.
Yeah.
So a new dad that doesn't want to wake up the baby, there's no clanging of weights. If you pull a pop pin or you are really quick with it, it'll make a little click. But other than that, there's no noise. So you can literally, like I said, beat yourself up for 30 minutes and the baby won't wake up. So
Yeah.
it's great for that.
Yeah. As a side note, I'd be curious to hear what did the Arnold Classic look like 25, 30 years ago?
Pretty much the same. I mean, I just went there a couple of years ago with my son Gabe. Just a lot of booths, and the big players, of course, had the big gigantic booths. And Greg Kovacs was there while he was still alive, and he was huge. Lou Ferrigno was there. Going to the Arnold Classic a couple of years ago, like I said, there's music, there's all the blondes wearing, bringing people in, trying to attract guys, giving samples. But it was pretty wild, man, to go to, because social media wasn't around back then, but to go to the Arnold 2 years ago and see Lee Haney is in his booth and nobody's at his booth. Everyone's going to see Sam Sulek. There's an
Mhm.
hour and a half wait to meet Sam Sulek. And here is Lee Haney, Mr. Olympia, 5 or 6 times. There's no one in his booth. And I saw him, I was like, "Oh my gosh," and I walked up to him like, "Man, was a huge fan and just the nicest guy." He's like, "Is that your son?" I go, "Yeah," and he goes, "He's getting bigger than you," and I'm like, "No, never." And, but it was wild, and even now to watch the guys, I'm loving Dorian Yates and a lot of the guys from that era talking about Paul Dillette, talking about their training and everything. It's been awesome to listen to their take on training from back in the day, and frankly, I'm looking at those guys back then compared to the guys now. No comparison. When you look at a guy like Dorian Yates or you look at Ronnie Coleman at his prime versus the guys now that are winning the Olympia,
Hmm.
come on, man. Not even there's no contest. Guys back then were so much bigger
Why do you
and
think that
fuller.
is?
Difference in training, like if you speak to Dorian Yates will tell you, which is my belief also, that there are a lot of guys out there talking about leaving 3 reps in the tank. What? And someone asked him, "Did you do that?" And he goes, "Yeah, we did that all the time. Yeah, we used to leave, 3 reps in the tank, each set." And he's like, "No, we didn't. What are you, crazy?" He goes, "We would call that a poof workout." My training has always been to failure because if you push the muscle beyond its limits, it'll have to adapt. That's a theory of adaptation. And how do your muscles adapt? By getting bigger and stronger. You don't leave 3 reps in the tank. You keep pushing until you can't push anymore, and maybe you push beyond where you can push, and that's why you had someone spotting you way back in the day to get those extra 3 reps at the point that you were beyond failure.
Got it. Cool. All right, man. Well, appreciate the stories. I wish you the
Well,
best of luck in this next upcoming round of pre-sales.
thank you, man.
You're still planning on it. Looking forward to meeting you at Home Gym Con. Yeah. Again, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah,
And I'll make sure to plug
thank
in
you,
the
man.
links to your website and then also the resistance band app you mentioned that people can get workouts in. And you just let me know if there's anything
Yeah.
else.
Man, well, this was so much fun. I can't thank you enough. They were great questions, and I love just to tell the story because it's pretty wild from
Yes.
1998.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of respect too for, you know, going all in again and again and again. I think it's awesome. And
Thank you,
again,
man.
wish you nothing but the best.
Jake, I appreciate it, man, and great talking to you.
Great talking to you.